I'd like to welcome our listeners to the Boulos Beat podcast. The Boulos Company is Northern New England's largest commercial real estate services firm with offices in Portland, Maine, as well as Manchester and Portsmouth, New Hampshire. We've been selling and leasing real estate in Maine and New Hampshire since 1975. Today we're bringing you a special retrospective episode featuring some of our most insightful guests and their predictions for the future of the real estate market in Maine. So sit back, relax, and join us as we ask our guests, looking into your crystal ball for the next 10 to 20 years, what do you see happening to commercial real estate here in Maine and Portland in particular? Hey, Fred, looking into your crystal ball, 10, 20 years from now, what do you see happening in Portland, Greater Portland? Any gut feel?
My feel is that we will continue to grow our people. I mean, I think the attraction to the city and the services. 3 years ago I would have said something different, but by Wex and Covetras, I got to get that right here.
Formerly Vets First Choice.
Vets First, yeah. I mean, when you see people like Ben Shaw, David Shaw, them making a major move, and that is going to spark other biotech firms to want to come to Portland.
Spin-offs, yeah.
That's going to, and honestly, the last 24 months with what's happened at USM, there's a new president there, Glenn Cummings, and Glenn is a guy that's got vision and passion for Portland, and I think we'll see that school grow and be a resource for the next 20, 30 years for people that want to be entrepreneurial in Portland. There's the thing that concerns me about Portland right now. I think we have to get involved in politics more aggressively, because right now there's an anti-growth, anti-development. Being in business is bad, I think, to a lot of people for whatever strange reason. I'm not sure, but if we're allowed, I think you could have a 12-month period of time where every month is strong in Portland, where right now, January, February, March, and April, you lose a lot of people. But if we can get businesses to locate downtown again and get it growing, sparked by these 3 or 4 new businesses down there, I think you're going to see Portland become a city versus a big town. And that's really what we need is for Portland to be a city that accepts everything. I don't think we'll lose the working waterfront. I think we can coexist down there. I do feel we need to address some major issues that we have with how we're managing opportunity for the homeless and really addressing some of those things. But overall, Portland is just a great city to live and work and bring up kids and experience. One thing you see is a lot of kids coming back in their late 20s and 30s because they're getting married and they want to bring up kids in an area. And when you look at other parts of the country, our school systems are some of the best, and that a lot of people won't send their kids to public school in a lot of parts of the country. And right now, Portland, the school system is still a top priority for a lot of people, and surrounding towns have great schools as well. And there's also great, schools like Cheverus and Waynfleet and some of the other opportunities. But the reality is, if we take advantage of everything Portland has, Portland will be, in my opinion, one of the best cities in the world.
David, looking into your crystal ball for the next 10 to 20 years, what do you see happening to commercial real estate here in Maine and Portland in particular?
Well, you're probably, I'm the wrong person to ask that. Being, I am one who's always my glass is always half full rather than half empty. So, looking back from my brief time here, which let's call it 1976 to the present, I can only see tremendous opportunity here. I think we've barely scratched the surface. I think if you look at the waterfront, it's more dynamic now in terms of diversification of uses. You only have to look at what Finney Sprague has done down on the western side to all the way up through Commercial Street. It couldn't be. It's never been this diverse in decades. And profitable, not just buildings. I was looking at some photographs of Commercial Street, even back into the 80s, and the number of vacant buildings was astonishing. It's not that way now. That's only a part of the city. I think that Bayside, is this untapped resource, and I think that it offers not only a gateway to the city because it's so visible from 295.
And that's the area between Congress Street and Marginal Way.
That's correct. And again, the city's had a hand in that, helping to provide a structure. But to date, there hasn't been a significant development that's a big enough bite out of the apple to make an impact there. But it's there, and it's whether it's additional office combination. I see if you ask me a vision, I would see something that is more of a collaborative neighborhood that offers solutions to peninsula parking, offers solutions to housing, and I'm not just affordable housing, but workforce housing for the folks that are coming here, and those jobs. We're looking at job levels that start at 65 to 85,000 and up. We haven't seen that in decades, perhaps ever in these numbers that are coming. And if we don't provide the housing, gentrification happens, and people get pushed out of housing into areas where they can't afford it. So I think there's a proper balance. And where can you do that? You need land. Bayside offers that land. What we need is a real vision, in which there's been several that have been placed on the table. None have been acted on. Now's the time.
Looking at your crystal ball, which I'm sure you have with you, for the next 10 to 20 years, what do you see happening to commercial real estate here in Maine, in Portland in particular? And we're going to play this back in 20 years just to see how good you are.
See how I was on the crystal ball?
But, yeah, I mean, where do you see the city heading?
I remain bullish on Portland itself. I think there's some incredible things that are happening in Portland. I still worry a lot about the overall state of Maine, particularly north of Portland. We're in a scenario that's a bit of the opposite of where I lived in Italy. All the finance and the engine of the economy of Italy is all driven kind of north of Rome, and all the social services kind of money spent is on the south side. And we're a bit upside down on that in the state of Maine. And, with the timber industry where it is, paper industry, we have some wonderful natural resources, but I just don't know how we're going to capitalize on those economically to really bring back some of the northern parts of the state of Maine, which I hope they can. But I think in Portland, I remain bullish on Portland for a number of reasons. I think that seeing things like WEX growing the way they're growing and committing to new office space that's attracting some really top talent here in the state, Covetrus doing the same type of thing. Those types of things make me feel good about what's happening in Portland, not only just overall, but also you asked earlier about hotels. A lot of these companies are driving hotel demand too, whether it's not just their employees, of course, but it's more the kind of business, transient business that's coming to visit them.
What do you call that? Heads in beds?
Heads in beds, exactly. And I think the other thing that's important is these educational institutions. And I touched on that briefly with Biddeford and with UNE being there in town. But of course, we've got the University of Southern Maine here. We've got Maine College of Art located downtown. Both of those institutions are phenomenal. I think the university might be changing its name to the University of Maine, Portland. But there's some exciting new things happening there. The graduate school that they're looking to merge the law and business school together and create a new program. And there's the new Ideals Center, which is being talked about, where David Rue is looking at trying to build a new life sciences graduate program here in the city. Some of those types of things I think are really what's going to make Portland kind of make a huge leap and be a really positive place to be long-term.
Really kind of anchors Portland in terms of the long
term. Absolutely. And, we're going to, like any real estate market, it's going to have its cyclical times, but I continue to be bullish that long-term we're going to be in good shape in Portland. Hopefully we'll weather whatever the next storm is that's coming. And that it's a minor cold front and not a hurricane, like what hit in 2008 and 2009. But I remain bullish on the fact that I think people want to be in places where they can enjoy the kind of lifestyle that we live here, and it's a very different lifestyle than the big primary markets of New York City or places like that. My wife and I, when we moved back from Italy, we had no tie to Maine. Neither of us had a job here. We thought about moving to London, and of all places, we ended up back in Portland, Maine, and I love it.
Joe, looking into your crystal ball for the next 10 to 20 years, what do you see happening to commercial real estate in the greater Portland area?
Well, I think we're going to go through some rough times in something probably less than a year. And I think the low rates portend some weaknesses in different places. I think the banks are having a particularly rough time because they have to work on a sufficient edge to keep them solvent.
Well, their margins are getting squeezed.
Margins are really getting squeezed badly. They used to be about 3 points. They're probably more like a 1.5 right now. And even those are being squeezed. And they want to put money out and keep the place moving and active and affluent. But it's really serious that they haven't been able to move more efficiently to narrow their own scopes down and to work in a sphere that would keep the better locations and the better properties getting stronger and letting the weaker ones probably go.
And Portland seems to be overbanked. I mean, there's a ton of banks.
Definitely.
And if you're looking to borrow money, you've got many options. I'm not sure why that is, but it works to the advantage of folks like yourself who are in the market for commercial lending.
It's a rare opportunity. I never expected rates to be this low. I mean, when you look at 30-year rates at 1.9 and 10-year rates at 1.4, it's really crazy. And then the 5 at 1.3. I mean, this is amazing. I've never seen that. When I started off, everybody paid 6%. Unless you were somebody of a very, very strong nature, General Motors, and they were paying 5%. And that was it. You got no breaks. We went through a rough period there where they shot up, as you well know. But unfortunately, I don't think we've recovered fully from the recession of the 08 and 09 period. I think it's more like a bright bulb that it glows and it gets bright before it dies. And I think we're at that point now where prices are so high and the bulb is so bright, and then I see an unfortunate flicker off.
And it happens quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah, real quickly before we even know it.
Looking into your crystal ball, and I know you don't have this much time left, but looking into your crystal ball for the next 10 to 20 years, what do you see happening to commercial real estate here in Maine and Portland in particular?
And I'm kind of out of it, to be honest, but people ask me a lot, is this a bubble? With WEX going downtown, with all of these Vets First Choice and all these condominiums being downtown, going downtown, we're paying $1 million for a condominium down here. The Eastern Prom, where you're paying $1 million. So they say, is it a bubble? I don't think it is a bubble. I think Portland is so hot and will continue to be hot, especially with technology and the ability to work from anywhere. Portland's a great place to be. I'd invest in Portland in a heartbeat today.
Hey, Pete, looking into your crystal ball, which I know you have.
Oh, yeah.
For the next 10, 20 years, what do you see happening to commercial real estate in Maine and Portland in particular?
Greg, I really don't know. But I think Portland is for real. It took me a while to believe it. I mean, as I look at hotels, my biggest, as you know, as you really know, you had under contract with me Tim Soley's Hyatt site. I believe I had the Reef site under contract at one time. I was in on the Hampton deal. The Hampton Inn deal I don't mind dropping out of because that was a recession. I was scared to death, and if we had one more year of that and I was trying to build that, I would have been in big trouble. But the other ones, I didn't know. I mean, I didn't know how to do parking. I didn't believe that Portland would be that good. And I think Portland is for real, but the rest of the state, you don't know. You never really know.
So looking into your crystal ball for, say, 10 years plus out, what do you see happening to commercial real estate in the Portland area?
I think Portland's different than the rest of the state.
Yeah, there's Portland and there's everything else.
It really is. I think it's fair to say that I'm not qualified to answer this question. I'll say up front, but I think a lot of people would agree with me. Portland is going to continue to be a junior version of Boston. It's going to be robust, mildly compared to Boston, but it's going to be a pretty safe, robust market. And I think, but Portland, I would not have predicted this. Karen and I both thought that Portland was going to be a tough place for our kids to work, to find a job, and there wouldn't be many young people here. And that was
changed.
Wrong completely. Outside of Portland, I'm scared to do stuff. I mean, when I see something that the numbers look good, but it's outside of Portland, I don't even look at it. And I know Lewiston Auburn very well. I love that community, but I won't invest there.
It's just a different dynamic up there.
It's a different dynamic. It's over the line. Portland's close enough to Boston in so many respects, but also geographically, it's close enough to Boston, so you're safe. And I've looked at Biddeford, and I can't. That's going to happen. I mean, that's as you know, I had a big property under option down there 5 years ago, and that's just a matter of time before that place gets good.
Vin, looking into your crystal ball, which I know you have, for the next 10 years, what do you see happening to commercial real estate here in Maine, in Portland in particular?
Yeah, I think you're going to see a fair amount of residential development continue. I think you will see some build to suit on the office side, like we've seen with Wex and with Covetras and with Sun Life. It's really tough to make numbers work on an office space right now with the added cost of parking. So you might get a tenant that will pay you $30 or $35 a foot, which is what really you have to get on a net basis to make the numbers work. But I just don't know how many companies can actually afford long-term to pay that. And so if you lose that lead tenant in, 5 or 10 years, it's going to be tough to replace those numbers, which is another reason why your capital stack has got to be not over-leveraged.
So looking into your crystal ball for the next 10 years, what do you see for the future of Maine and the real estate market here?
Yeah, I'm really interested to see when the B locations or the Class B locations become Class A locations or Class C locations. Or do we have other entries into a Class A location? Does Lewiston become, does Waterville become, does Wyndham become, and I think when we look at, when I evaluate Portland, I always feel like I'm behind on the A market list. Mm-hmm. And I can't quite keep up with it. And some of the pricing that you see, it doesn't necessarily make sense to me. But some of the greatest growth that we have in Maine is happening in the B markets. And what's happened in Waterville in the last 3 years is astonishing.
Yeah.
In Main Street in Waterville has been on a downward slope since 1970. You could argue, because as the mills leave and the factory jobs have left, and man, there's a tough, resilient community there that have just held on and held on and held on. And then I think really at the impetus of the college, mm-hmm. Who once moved out of the downtown of Waterville up to Mayflower Hill, but is now coming back to the downtown because they grasp how important it is for the universities and colleges to be linked to their communities. It can't just be, this is our hill and this is your downtown and here's our line, and because I think as the world or the thinkers of the world try to solve global problems, trying to do that in a tower on your own or on a hill on your own, I just don't think it works. I mean, to solve real world problems, you got to be in the real world, right? And I think that's imperative there. But what's going on in Waterville? If you look at the growth, I mean, it's one of the fastest growing communities in the East. I mean, what's happening there with new businesses and storefronts and facade improvements, and Colby moving a new dorm downtown and buying other buildings and building a new hotel, and that's really attracted, I think, investors with an affinity to Colby. A lot of Colby alums have invested in the downtown, and a lot of people who have nothing to do with Colby have invested in the downtown because they see the resurgence there. And at what point does that become does that change market grade? And I'm really fascinated. There's great movement in Brunswick. There's great movement in Lewiston. There's great movement in Waterville, and watching where those where those communities and where those markets peak, I think is fascinating. I think is fascinating. I think sometimes I think it certainly isn't a hyper market in Waterville. I kind of feel like people are still waiting there. And there's a lot of the requests that I've got for some of my spaces might be from a store shop owner in Fairfield, the next town up, who's on Main Street in Fairfield, that sees Main Street in Waterville doing something really unique that may not happen on Main Street in Fairfield or Oakland or Clinton or Pittsfield. Okay, but and so how do they get to Waterville and move their location to downtown and maybe still pay Main Street Fairfield pricing, which doesn't quite work because you've had to kind of ramp up and put more investment into the downtown. But there's to me, the way I describe Waterville is it's working and it's advancing, and there's quite a pile on the sidelines still waiting to jump in, and it's hard to know when that's going to happen. And so then that leads you, when do you take a lease offer, right? You take it now, we wait in 6 months, or we wait in another spring season, do we miss something? It's a fun time to see when those really resurging markets click or move to a new class.
Yeah.
So as you look forward, you've touched on it a little bit. If you have your crystal ball for what Portland will look like over the course of the next 10 years, what do you see?
I think continued growth. I think, when you look at the built environment, there's still a lot of surface parking lots, around downtown Portland.
Right.
There's enormous opportunity. I mean, we haven't gotten into it, but, I like to talk about what a sustainable city looks like and what a sustainable planet looks like, because I think what we're doing contributes to those ends. My view is Portland should have 100,000 people, not 66,000. We've been stuck on 65 or 66 or 67,000 for, I think for the past, 4 decades, right?
Yeah.
We built new housing, but these families, the families on Munjoy Hill that had, 7 people living in, in a small house are gone, and we've got a,
in the early 20th century, there were way more people in Portland.
That's right. And so, we've got singles and couples, buying the housing units and large families leaving, so our population has been stagnant. We need to have a more walkable city. We need to have a more accessible city. I think investment in transit is critical for Portland to take the next step to be a truly great small city. We've got a long way to go with respect to transit. So those are the things that I'm focused on. What can make Portland great? I think the university, the Rue Institute is a great start. Real investment in mass transit, in transit-oriented development. Can we build the Forest Ave corridor and have if not a streetcar, a really sort of user-friendly bus system, and those things would go a long way. But I think the upside for Portland is immense, and I think the greatest days are ahead.
Well, looking into your crystal ball for the next 10 years, what do you see happening in commercial real estate in Greater Portland and in Maine in general?
Well, I think southern Maine will remain strong. I'm sure it will ebb and flow some, but what's interesting to me is the footprint of Portland's got to grow. And what I mean by that is when I say it's got to grow north of the city, and it's certainly got to grow south of the city, and it's got to grow west of the city. And I think we'll need some dynamic changes in our infrastructure to do that, to provide for that. And I also think the outcome of good infrastructure and good footprint growth to allow for additional growth in southern Maine for Portland would also allow Portland kind of a clear line on increasing their commerce. God bless Portland, have been hit so hard with the pandemic because our revenue sources are not diversified enough. Heavy restaurant, basically heavy tourism.
Yeah.
Heavy hotel. I think as a result of this pandemic and just in general good business, the idea is your revenue streams are diversified. And there's plenty of opportunity in Portland to do that. So I think we'll see some of that behavior, and as a result of that, I think you'll see the footprint of Portland grow, provided we allow for the infrastructure for that to happen. And I think certainly, to your point earlier, the rural nature of southern Maine as it relates to some of the big cities, for example, Boston, I think there's good business opportunities for business to relocate here and provide for a better place for people to live, more affordable, have parking at work, have parking at home.
Yeah, and
there's a lot of hidden costs.
Be close to the ocean and great trail systems and the mountains. And
Portland's got a lot to offer, and I think as a result of the unfortunate situation we're in, I think you might see businesses looking more at, gee, I like that rural setting. I like being able to offer my team a place to live, a place to play, a place to work. I think there's some things there that we'll see come through in the next decade.
Yeah.
You know, looking into your crystal ball, over the next 10 years or so, what do you see happening to residential real estate here in Maine and say Portland in particular?
This pandemic has made the concept of a home very different, something that we've never seen. It now a home is, it's where your child is educated, so it's a school. Restaurants are far less, so it's kind of where you dine. It's where you spend your time. You know, it's where you watch movies. You don't go to the theater, you watch Netflix. So a home is part school, part restaurant, part, I mean, it is, you're spending so much time there that I think there's going to be I think there's going to be an uptick in people wanting to live in Maine. That I think sort of the real urban movements that we've had, I think, you know, from what I'm hearing from brokers is that there are people saying, geez, if I can work from anywhere, why don't I come work here in Maine or New Hampshire where it's beautiful?
You know, what I'm hearing from my counterparts in the residential world, brokers, is that demand is off the shelf.
Yeah.
It's crazy. In my neighborhood where I live, there was a New Yorker, came up, bought a house, sight unseen, 3 houses from me, paid what we considered was a huge amount of money, and he hadn't even seen the house. He had his broker did a video.
Right.
And he did it because he had young children, wanted to get them out of the city. And I'm seeing that over and over and over.
So I think there will be a demand. You know, at the same time, this haves and have-nots gulf, I'm worried, is going to get bigger because that's driving up prices. Right. The people that are doing the service jobs and medical assistants or working retail, I don't know where they're going to find their path, and so I think we really got to get busy on the affordable housing side. And last year there were 185 new affordable units created in all of Maine. We got to do That's it. We got to do 5-10 times more than that to start to meet. I mean, I think that we need 22,000 new units in Maine is what Maine State Housing Authority estimates, and I think it's what is the right number. We're not going to get there at 185 a year. We got to do 500 or 1,000 a year.
So looking into your crystal ball for the next 10 years, what do you see happening to commercial real estate here in Maine and Portland in particular?
Yeah, that's there's so many factors, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, especially now, yeah.
Yeah, but even outside of COVID, we've talked about a little bit already. I think Maine and Portland present a desirable place people want to be, right? Mm-hmm. For some of the factors we talked about, it's a beautiful, scenic place. It has good schools, low crime rates, a good healthcare system. I think reasonable government, somewhat independent government. Mm-hmm. So I think we have a lot of things going for us that'll keep the commercial market relatively strong.
Yep.
Outside of these ups and downs. The big question I always worry about are the macro things that are out of our control here in Maine, such as a huge national debt, even a looming global debt crisis. So will that do something eventually to interest rates that it seems to have escaped so far? And would we see return to double-digit interest rates or something like that? So, you know, that's the part that I don't know enough about to predict, but you know, my crystal ball right now includes deleveraging a little bit. So I don't know if that'll be the right strategy, especially considering interest rates are so low right now.
Right.
But I'd rather be a little bit ready to take advantage if there are some opportunities.
Thank you for joining us for this special edition of the Boulos Beat. If you'd like to learn about the Boulos Company, please be sure to visit us at www.boulos.com. You can find us at the Boulos Company on Facebook and LinkedIn, and at the Boulos Co. on Instagram and Twitter. And lastly, if you want to know the secret to owning real estate, it's pretty simple. Just be sure to outlive your debt.